Yella, no good feasting off my property before I pump your guts full of lead.
All right, Johnny, I'm sorry. I'm going.
display this essentially our error message. Check out, I'll have a link in the cards and the description below. So now down here inside of our body, we also need to be able to hash our user's password. And to do that, we're going to use something called bcrypt, which is a library that we want to install. So down here inside of our terminal, we can just hit plus to open up a new terminal, and we can type in npm I bcrypt. And bcrypt is going to allow us to hash passwords as well as to compare hashed passwords to make sure that our, and inside of here, we use password. So we can create, which is, now if I save that, sort of reloads, this variable users is going to get your function called pass. The local version essentially allows us to use usernames and passwords for logging in. Passport has a bunch of different ways you can log in, whether it's through Google, Facebook, local password, email, etc. So we just want to use the local version, but again, if you wanted to experiment with other versions, feel free to. Also, in order to store and persist our user across different pages, we need to use something called session, so we're going to install express session, and also to display messages for if we fail to log in, we're going to install something called express flash, which is used by Passport inside the internals to display those nice handy messages for wrong email, wrong password, etc. So after that finishes installing, there we go, we can now actually set up our Passport to be working with our login. And while we could put all this information into our server file here, it's quickly going to become quite large and bloated, so what I like to do is actually create a separate file, and we're just going to call this here passport config.js, and in here we're going to put all of our different passport related information, and we're going to do it all inside of a function, which we're going to just call initialize. There we go. And inside of this function, we're going to initialize our passport, which we're going to make sure that we pass to our initialize function. And then inside of our server, what we want to do is we actually want to require that. So we can just come down here and we can require that function. We'll just call it here, initialize passport. Oops. And that's going to be equal to require. And we want to make sure that we require here our passport config. And then we can just call that function initialize passport. And we'll pass it in our passport variable, which we can just get by using const passport is equal to require of passport, which is just that library we just installed. Now we are calling this function initialize passport inside of our passport config here, and we can do all of our configuration for passport inside of
So you want to learn programming, and you've heard some good things about the Odin project. But amidst all of the industry-wide layoffs and with the risk of AI replacing us, you're wondering if the Odin project is still worth it in 2024. In short, yes and no. Here's why. Starting with the cons. Web development is very saturated, especially at the entry level. This is because everyone wanted to become a software engineer, due to the high pay and chill working conditions. And what do all of the influencers and bootcamps tell you to start with? HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Which is understandable because all you need is a text editor and a browser to see quick results. No need for a compiler or an object-oriented language, you can build stuff very fast using vanilla.js. This led to an influx of bootcampers and self-taught developers with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as their main skills. Web development and frontend in particular got very saturated quickly. I know that demand for good, experienced full-stack engineers is still very high, but at the entry level, it's another reality, because everyone and their mom knows or is currently learning JavaScript. That is reflected in the Stack Overflow developer survey, where, as you can guess, the majority of people are learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The fact is, the Odin project became quite popular for beginners wanting to learn to code, which means that a lot of developers might have the exact same experiences and projects as you, increasing the competition. Fortunately, there is a solution. It's to use the Odin project as a guiding path and not relying on it 100%. For example, you can use it to learn the different concepts that there is in programming, But then you can apply those concepts in your own projects instead of building the projects that Odin proposes. In this market, this is exactly what you need, an X factor. Something that differentiates you from the masses. Quite honestly, building another to-do list or a weather app is not going to land you a job. So, what can you do? Well, you can pivot in a completely different direction and focus on a specific programming area which might have a bit less demand, but a lot less competition. Think about what you're interested in building. If you want to build embedded systems, go with C or C++. Or even Rust actually, since it's a growing language and it's loved by many. If you want to stay within the realm of building applications, you can look at enterprise software, which is mostly built using Java or C#. Of course, with Java, you might have competition from all of the computer science graduates, who are mostly learning it at school. So I don't really recommend going down this path unless you really want to learn Java for some reason. On the other hand, a lot of people have told me that they loved working with C#, as it's a clean language that has a very nice ecosystem. C# is widely used in the industry. There are a lot of jobs available and a lot less competition, especially when comparing it to web development. But honestly, web development still offers the most job opportunities, as there are full stack, front-end, and back-end software engineers. And building web apps is just fun. If you want to succeed as a web developer, you have to choose the right path. Now, you might be wondering, what the hell is this guy talking about? Well, the Odin project has two distinct tracks, JavaScript and Ruby on Rails. Most people will choose the JavaScript path without even thinking about it, because that's where all the jobs are at, right? Yeah, that's true. JavaScript is indeed the most in-demand language in the world, but it also has the most competition. The times of learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and landing a job in 6 months are over. Nowadays, you might have to learn TypeScript, React, Next.js, and so much more to stay relevant in the field. You cannot just be average and expect to land a job. In this market, you have to be exceptional. Honestly, most people just look at the length of the two paths and choose the shortest one, which is JavaScript. It has 6 courses compared to Ruby's 8. Unfortunately, that is the mentality of most beginner programmers. They think that they can learn everything that there is to know in a few months and land a job easily. Unfortunately, landing a job might not take months, but years. So I suggest you listen to what I have to say about the second path in the Odin project, which is Ruby on Rails. I know what you're gonna say. Ruby is dead. But I did my research. Looking at job listings on Indeed for software engineers in the United States, there are around 20,000 job openings for JavaScript and 2,000 for Ruby. Ruby is definitely not dead, especially considering that huge companies like Shopify and GitHub were built using it. Ruby is a very fun language to learn, and startups absolutely love using Rails, because it allows them to iterate very quickly and to build MVPs very fast. So Ruby has 10% of the total job openings of JavaScript. But how many people are currently learning it? Well, according to the Stack Overflow developer survey, 60% of respondents said that they were learning JavaScript, while only 2.5% are learning Ruby. Of course, I know this is a single source of information, and you should probably check out your local markets to validate if it's the same. But if it is, it means that there is a huge gap in the market for Ruby developers, because there's a decent amount of demand and a relatively low supply. And it shows. The Stack Overflow developer survey mentions that Ruby devs are amongst the highest paid in the industry, with an average salary of $98,000 compared to $74,000 for JavaScript. As a Ruby dev, it will be easier to stand out in the sea of JavaScript developers, and it might also lead to opportunities with other programming languages, because employers will see that you are very adaptable. So, looking at the two paths in the Odin project. The Ruby path has everything that JavaScript has, except the Node.js course, because we're obviously going to be using Ruby on Rails for the backend. That means you will learn Ruby, Ruby on Rails, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and even React in their newly updated course. Furthermore, the Ruby path will teach you to learn SQL using Postgres as the database of choice, which is a lot more useful to learn than MongoDB, the database that they're using in the JavaScript path. Yes, I know, the Ruby path will take longer to finish. That's without a doubt. But I honestly think that it will make you a better developer and help you stand out in this crowded software engineering market. So going back to our original question, Is the Odin project still worth it in 2024? If you want to go in another field like embedded systems, game dev, or AI, the Odin project is clearly not for you. And that's totally okay. But if you're dead set on web development, and you want to have the capability of building any web application that you have in mind, the Odin project is, without a doubt, the best resource on the internet to learn web development. It's a project-based curriculum and it has a great community on Discord if you ever have questions to ask. So I give you my opinion on the best path to choose within the Odin project for 2024. But now I want to hear yours in the comments below. Which path are you going to choose? JavaScript or Ruby on Rails? Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. So you want to learn programming, and building web apps is just fun. If you want to, responders said that they were learning JavaScript, while only 2.5% are learning Ruby. Of course,
Hey everybody, so hey everybody, welcome to Hey everybody, welcome back. So today we are going to start the full stack Ruby on Rails project, and we are actually going to jump straight to the Ruby on Rails here. So we're going to open up the course, and our first one will be how this course will work. The portion of the curriculum will be most build heavy so far. You will still be asked to read docs, check out blog posts, and watch videos before building, of course, but projects will be a major focus. After each lesson or two, you'll be asked to build one or more independent projects utilizing the concepts that were just covered. Which is exactly what we've been doing up until now. So now we have the roadmap. After preparing for development and installing Rails, we'll be starting with an overview.
All right, hey, welcome back, everybody. We're doing the Ruby on Rails course, and we're getting into the deployment. So I'm going to read through, and then we've got this here. Accepting connections. Oh, jeez, that's just a very difficult one. So if we create that, we've got it. Okay, so we've got a production Ruby on Rails application. We could go back to blogs and we'd see them all. And so yeah, there's going to be a lot of stuff that you can do with this. But now that it's deployed, that's a huge issue. I think part one had me setting it up. If anybody goes through that and they would like a refresh, I could probably do that. But yeah, so we've got it running locally, but then we also have it running in production.
В моем доме холодно и темно, в моей голове пустота и мрак. Я не ощущаю совсем ничего и жду хоть какой-то знак. Все мои песни совсем не о том, все мои мысли как черный дым. За стеной у соседей все хорошо, и им все равно, что в глазах у них пыль. Я честен и искренен буду всегда, и это, наверное, моя беда. Я хотел быть другим, но уже никогда во мне не загорится та звезда. Я становлюсь старше быстрее и быстрее, и все меньше ощущаю себя среди людей. Я так волнуюсь за завтрашний день, но я верю, что завтра я стану сильнее. Не общайтесь со мной, я так ненавижу это. Забирайте мою жизнь, оставьте кусочек лета. Ничего не поменяю, я уже не подросток. Мама, объясни, ну для чего я стал взрослым. Не общайтесь со мной, я так ненавижу это. Забирайте мою жизнь, оставьте кусочек лета. Ничего не поменяю, я уже не подросток. Мама, объясни, ну для чего я стал взрослым. Несовместимые вещи во мне создают проблемы и мысли о том, почему я стал именно таким, почему во мне этот дурдом. Серые краски, городской шум вводят в депрессию вечно меня, и никто уже отсюда не спасет, ведь в это кем мы каждый вечер засыпать с мыслью, что я потерял еще день. Каким же буду через несколько лет? Наверное, так же не изменюсь. Я обязательно об этом напишу еще одну песню про мою грусть. Не общайтесь со мной, я так ненавижу это. Забирайте мою жизнь, оставьте кусочек лета. Ничего не поменяю, я уже не подросток. Мама, объясни, ну для чего я стал взрослым? Не общайтесь со мной, я так ненавижу это. Забирайте мою жизнь, оставьте кусочек лета. Ничего не поменяю, я уже не подросток. Мама, объясни, ну для чего я стал взрослым?
Out of this single file. And
Не общайтесь со мной, я так ненавижу это. Забирайте мою жизнь, оставьте кусочек лета. Ничего не поменяю, я уже не подросток. Мама, объясни, ну для чего я стал взрослым? Не общайтесь со мной, я так ненавижу это. Забирайте мою жизнь, оставьте кусочек лета. Ничего не поменяю, я уже не подросток. Мама, объясни, ну для чего я стал взрослым?
Нравится улица, но плащ мой промок, и сверху, и снизу вода. На мой полуночный телефонный звонок. Вид города сверху цветное панно. Она утверждает, ставь на зеро. Я ставлю себя, а куда все равно. Попадаю к ней в засаду. Ставим на зеро. Это странный ход, но на зеро всегда везло. Ставим на зеро. Это странный ход, но на зеро всегда везло. Я удачно внедрен в индустриальный пейзаж. В том, наверное, мне повезло. Но дождь разрушил мой чудесный коллаж, и я решаю играть на зеро. Принял еще одну форму баланс. Наши капризы заключили альянс. Упущено время, но можно уйти, чтоб не дышать.
I have opened my code editor. Next, open terminal. First, install Express module.
Ставим на зеро. Это странный ход, но на зеро.
Then, install Mongoose module. Next, install BCRYPT module.
Это странный ход, но на зеро всегда везло.
Next, install EJS module. In package.json file are all module installed successfully. Next, create a folder with name src. In this folder, create a file with name index.js. Create one more file in this folder with name config.js. Next, open your index.js file. Here, first, import Express module. Next, import built-in path module. Next, import BCRYPT module. Next, create an Express application. Next, choose a port where you want to run your application. I choose 5000. Next, set EJS as a view engine. Next, create a new folder which name views. In this folder, create 3 files. First, home.ejs. Second, login.ejs. Third, signup.ejs. Next, create another folder which name public. In this folder, create one CSS file which name style.css. Next, use app-get method. In this first parameter is a root and second is callback function. In callback function we have 2 parameter, request and response. You can give any name to it. Next, I use res.render method and in this I render login page. I can use another app-get method and in this I render signup page and in root I define signup page. Next, open login.ejs file. In this, first I write basic HTML code. Next, I change the title of this page. Next, I write one div tag and give class name form container. In this Now, I style this form. Open, style.static folder path. Next, open login page. Here, I link a style.css file using link tag. I style the ID which have form container class. Next, I style input field. Next, open your browser and reload it. Next, open CSS file and change the font size of input field. Next, browser and reload it. Next, I style button tag. And this page is empty. Now, open your code editor. Copy all login file code and paste in signup file. File. Next, open your browser and reload it. Then, click on sign up button and you can see I created sign up page successfully. Base, first name and second password. Next, I create a model. In model we have 2 parameter, first is collection name and second we pass our schema. Next, I export this model. Next, open index.js file. And, here import model from config.js file. In terminal you can see our database connection successfully. Now, I write a functionality for sign-up page. Here, I use app-post method, and in this we define a root as a first parameter and second we use callback function. In callback function we have 2 parameter, request and response, you can give any name to it. When we are playing with MongoDB database, first I need to make a function async. Next, I create an object and in this I get data from body which we can send through sign-up form. This username same like sign-up username input name attribute. Next, I write a code for send this data into database, here I user insert many method. Next, I console.log method to show data in terminal, to check which kind of data we can send. First we need to convert data into JSON format, for this I use appUse method and in this I use express JSON method. Next, I use express Erlang encoded method. Now, our code is done. Open your browser and reload it. Now, I enter a name and password in input field. Next, click on Sign Up button. In Terminal, you can see our record successfully added. Next, open database and refresh it. I see a record twice time because I clicked 2 times on Sign Up button. But, here you can see I have 2 user with same name, now I apply restriction on it. Here, I check if user already exists. Next, I find a user from database using find_one method, and store in exist user variable. Next, I use if condition and said if you already exist then try another name. Next, open your browser and reload it. Now, I enter a same name of user and want to save in database. Click on Sign Up button and you can see I get message user already exist. Next, open database and refresh it. In database you can see I get third record. So, check our code again because logical error in our code. Here, you can see I cannot use else part of if condition due to this reason after if condition our code run. So, I write SL part and in this I write data insertion code. Now, if user exist, if part execute otherwise or else part execute. Now, again I write same username and click on Sign Up button. Here, you can see I get message you already exist. Now, open database and refresh it. Now, you can see, at this time user cannot be added in our database, I have only 3 record which I sent before. Now, I want to hash the password, because this password easily hack. For hashing password I use bcrypt method. First, I set salt rounds. Next, I convert the password into hash form and save in hash password variable. In first parameter of hash method, I write data.password and second we pass salt rounds. Next, I replace the hash password with original password. Next, open your browser and reload it. Now, again I want to register a user. Click on Sign Up button. Next, open your database and refresh it. You can see our password successfully converted into hash format. Password. You can see our password successfully converted into hash format. Next, I write a code for user login. Here, I use @post method. In first parameter we define root and in second we use callback function. In callback function we have 2 parameter, request and response. You can give any name to it. Next, we make a function async. Next, I use try and catch method. Next, I check user. If user are not registered in our database, show a message user cannot find. Next, I compare a hash password from database. We store comparing password in as password match variable. Next, I use if-else condition if password match render to home page, otherwise display a message password are not correct. In catch, we write res.send method, and in this I write a message wrong detail. Next, open home.ejs file. In this file, first I write basic HTML code, then I use h1 tag, and in this tag I write welcome to home page. And then I apply CSS property on this tag text align center. Next, save all changes and open your browser. Reload it. Click on sign up button and register one more user. Here, you can see our data successfully added in database. Open database and refresh it. And in database you can see our record successfully added. Application on login button. Next, I enter a wrong name of user and then try to log in.
Hello and welcome. Hi, I'm Dave. This tutorial is part of a Node.js and Express for Beginners tutorial series. I'll put a link to the full playlist in the description below. Today, we will add protected routes to our Express API by using JWTs. Let's discuss the JWT strategy we're going to implement today. So what are JWTs? What is the acronym JWT an abbreviation for? Well, I'm very excited about the upcoming launch of the James Webb Telescope, but in this case, that is not the correct answer. Concerning our Node and Express REST API, JWT is an abbreviation for JSON Web Tokens. JWTs can be considered to be a form of user identification that is issued after the initial user authentication takes place. When a user completes their login process and they are authenticated, our REST API will issue the client application an access token and a refresh token. The access token is given a short time before it expires, for example 5 to 15 minutes. And the refresh token is given a longer duration before it expires, possibly several hours, a day, or even days. While no security measures are perfect, we do want to consider the risks of cross-site scripting and cross-site request forgery. I will provide links about both in the description below. Our API will send and receive access tokens as JSON data. To avoid the previously mentioned risks, it is recommended for front-end client applications to only store access tokens in memory, so they will be automatically lost when the app is closed. They should not be stored in local storage or in a cookie. Essentially, if you can store it somewhere with JavaScript, a hacker can also retrieve it with JavaScript. Just keep access tokens in memory, which you might also refer to as the current application state. Our API will issue refresh tokens in an HTTP-only cookie. This type of cookie is not accessible with JavaScript. Refresh tokens do need to have an expiration, which will then
Hey everyone, in this video I will show you how you can make a login sign up form with the help of Node, Express and MongoDB. Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, you need to install 3 applications or 3 extensions. For the first one is Express, then we have to install HBS, which is an engine for Express, and then we will install Mongoose. Okay, so let me first install, so let me just clear this. Okay, now I will write npm I Express. It will install express.js in my folder. Okay, as you can see here, I have package.json and package log.json. Then I will install HBS. Okay, you can also use pug.js or EJS for this one, but in this video I am using HBS. Then at last we will install Mongoose, which will help us to connect pug.js or EJS for this. We will install HBS. Okay, you can also use pug.js or EJS for this one, but in this video I am using HBS. Then at last we will install Mongoose, which will help us to connect MongoDB to Node.js. Alright, we are done with all the installations, and if you take a look at the package.json, here you can see all three: Express, HBS and Mongoose. Okay, you can see the versions also. Alright, so let's create some files. First of all, I will create src, in which I will create index.js and one more file which is mongodb.js. Alright, then I will create another folder, not inside this, but no, not inside this one, outside src, and it will be public. Okay, inside this our css files will lie. Okay, so let's say home.css. We will have three HTML files. Okay, the first one is home, login and sign up. So let's create login.css and signup.css. Alright, and one more last folder we want, which will be templates. Okay, in which our HBS file will lie. Okay, and then you have to write const app is equal to express. It will start the express dot. Alright, and now if we will just control save as commas view engine HBS. Okay, so we are defining that our view engine is HBS. Okay, so if you have EJS or pug.js, you will write EJS or pug here, okay, instead of this HBS. And one more line you have to write here, app.set views. This line is for to change the name of the file. Okay, instead of this. Alright, so we will write template path. Okay, so what is the set? Okay, make sure, and it is important, Mongo, and the type will be also the string, and required will also be true. Okay, so if you can see, and now we have to also require this 3000, and as you can, okay, let's see now, reload the page, and as you can see here we are getting a link. So if you login and sign up form, and then I will send wrong details. Okay, wrong details here. Alright, now
Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Destiny and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, we're going to go ahead and start building a fully functional authentication system using Node.js. So in this one, we're going to be building a login, logout and register function. So users can come over to our website, create an account, log into their homepage, and we're going to display their data dynamically. For example, we're going to get the name of a user that's creating an account, and we're going to say something like hello dear, hello Tom, or hello Sam, or whatever. So that's what we're going to be building in this video. So if you want to see more videos like this, do make sure to drop a like and consider subscribing, as it will really mean the world to me. So without wasting any more time, let's go ahead and get started. So before we go ahead and get started, I want to show you guys what the end products of what we'll be building is going to look like, and I'm going to demo it for you guys right now. So when you come over to localhost 3000, as you can see, we are listening for the port on 3000 and login. You can see that we have this login page over here. So this is actually working quite well. Let's say we want to hop over to the home page. As you can see, it will allow us to do that. It will bring us back to the login page. So it's saying, hey, you have to log in before you access the home page. Okay, now firstly, let's create an account. We don't have an account yet, so I'm going to create an account myself. My name is Destiny Franks. My email is desfix@gmail.com, and I'm going to put a very strong password over here, and that's my email. So I'm going to go ahead and hit sign up. Now hit sign up, and as you can see, it brings us to the login page where we can now log in with the credentials that we just created. How about we just go ahead and hit sign in without putting in anything? Now you can see it displays an error and it says missing credentials. Hey, you've got to put something in here. Now how about we put in the email and we'll put in some gibberish password. That's not what we used. Now what do you notice? It's gonna say password incorrect. Okay, how about we come over here and put in an email and add, like, let's say a typo to it and put in a password that doesn't make any sense, I hit sign in, as you can see it says no user found with that email. So now we are getting 3 error messages. When you don't put in anything, it's going to tell you, hey, you've got to put in something in there. When you're not using the right password, it's going to tell you, hey, your password isn't correct, and likewise for your email. So now let's go ahead and meet all the requirements that this needs, and we're going to log in. So I'm going to put in my real password and I'm going to hit sign in. So right now, as you can see, I hit sign in, and what do you notice? It says hello Destiny Franks. So let's say your name is Tim or your name is Tom and you're the one signing in here. It's going to say hello Tom, or it's going to say hello Karen, and all that kind of stuff. You get the gist. So this is what we've got over here now. It's very, very simple. I just want to show you guys how it's getting the name dynamically from the database. And finally, we can go ahead and log out. So when you log out, it comes back to the login page, and if you try accessing the back page again, as you can see, it keeps bringing you back here. Okay, so that's pretty much what we'll be building in this video. Hopefully you guys are gonna enjoy it and learn a whole lot of new things here, working with sessions, working with flash messages, working with servers, and a whole lot of things. Without wasting any more time, let's just go ahead and get started already. Now the first thing we need to do is go ahead and open up a terminal, or you can open up command prompt or git cmd, whatever. So what we're going to be doing now is go ahead and install some of the packages, and we're just going to go ahead and like stick with the default ones for F like this. And what we want to install is NodeMon. We want to install Node. You guys will understand what's going on. So over here, I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it .gitignore like this. And I created .gitignore. I'm going to create another one. I'm going to call it .env. So in .env, that's where we're going to be storing all our secret keys. So I'm simply going to come over here and create a secret underscore key, and this is going to be set to whatever you want. So what you're supposed to know about this is that the longer the key, the more secure it's going to be. The longer and the more complex it is, the more secure it's going to be. So secret key is equal to this. I'm going to go ahead and close this up. And in the .gitignore, what we want to ignore is the .env file, and want to ignore the node modules, just like that. Okay, so when we are pushing this to GitHub or to wherever, it's not going to push the env, and it's not going to push the node modules. Okay, so I think that's pretty much what we want to do for here. Now we want to go ahead and open up the package.json, and want to go ahead and create a development server. So over here we're going to say dev start. That's what we're going to call it, and we want to start dev start at we're going to come over here outside there, put a semicolon, and we're going to put, firstly, it's going to take in NodeMon, and it's going to take in server.js. So server.js, that's what we're going to be running. Now what we simply want to do is come over here, and we're going to create a new server.js. Okay, so with this now, when we come over to localhost, what we're going to see is the server.js. But right now, let me go ahead and open this up so you guys will see what I'm talking about. So if I come over to localhost 3000, now we're not going to see anything. Definitely it's going to throw an error, because number one, we are not running the server. Number two, we are not listening for any ports, and number three, we don't even have any routes yet that's going to help us get any specific page. So let's just go ahead and do all that real quick. Now what you want to do in our terminal over here, I want to say npm run dev start. So you remember the dev start that we created in the package.json over here, this one, that's what we're running over here. Now this is going to go ahead and run this on our local host. So when we click on this, we are supposed to see something, but now we are not listening for this port over here, so nothing is going to happen. Now in order to do that, you want to come over to your server.js. So in our server.js, what we simply want to do is go ahead and import some of the libraries that we installed. So to import them, firstly, we're going to create a const and assign a variable to this. You can call this whatever you want. Then we want to simply go ahead and say require, and we're going to pass in express. So we created a variable express, and we required the express that we imported, or rather that we installed using npm iexpress from a few seconds ago. You still remember. Now we need to go ahead and create an app. So we're going to say app, and we're going to set this to the express that we have above. So now we simply have a variable app, and we assign it to this express over here, and we opened up two parentheses. Okay, just like this. So with this now, we can simply go ahead and say something like app.listen. So we're going to be listening for 3000. So now when we come over here and make sure our server is still running, and come over here and refresh, what do you notice? Now it's working, but it's saying cannot get. So it's not having any, it's not having anywhere that it's going to route to and all that. So in order to create our first route, it's going to be quite easy. I'm just going to say app.get, and app.get, what we're simply going to pass in is slash. So passing a slash over here means that I want to come over to this first page. Let's say we did something like slash hello. So for us to see anything, we need to come over to slash hello. Hopefully you guys understand the gist. Okay, now over here in the slash, we're simply going to go ahead and pass in some things. This is going to take in two variables. The first one is going to be request, the other one is going to be response. So we're passing in request and response in here. Now we can simply go ahead and render a template. So we can see res.render, and we can simply render an index.ejs template over here. So we say index.ejs over here, and now we need to create an index.ejs. But for now, I don't want to do that. I want to actually go ahead and show you guys something. So we're going to say res.send. So I'm just going to pass in res.send over here, and let's see. Okay, I think there is an error. Now we're passing passing res.send. I'm gonna say hello there. Now when we come over and refresh, what do you notice? We're gonna have hello there that will pass in over here. Now this is where we'll be writing all our HTML code, and we're gonna just like break things apart like this. Come over here, write all the HTML code, but that's not gonna look neat. It's gonna look so untidy. Now in order to write our HTML code, we're gonna go ahead and create a new file for it. So instead of passing in just the HTML codes like this in here, we're gonna pass in a template in here. So the template is gonna be called index.ejs. Now we use render to pass in the template. Okay, so when we've done this, what we simply want to do is just go ahead, come over here and create a new folder. I'm going to call this views, and in this views folder, we're going to create a new file, and it's going to be called index.egs. Okay, now we have index.egs. If we come over here and refresh this stuff, now you can see we have nothing. So you remember when we wrote hello there in here? Now you don't need to do that in there. You need to now do it in here. So we're going to say hello there. Now when we come over here and refresh, what do you notice? We have hello there. So this is where we could write all our code for the front end. Yeah, basically for the front end. And for the back end, we're going to write anything in the server.js. So I'm going to go ahead and create two more views. The first one is EGS. The second one, that's what I'm supposed to say. Second one is going to be login.egs, and we also need to have register.ejs. Okay, but we don't have any routes for this already. So I just want you guys to understand the way things are working over here. Now we have a template index.egs. We need to have a route for it. Let's say you're coming from the Django background. This is going to be called a view. So you need to have a view for it that's going to render the template. This is simply what we have. Now we have the login.egs, but there is no way to access this. We need to firstly create a route for it. So a route is something like this. Okay, now we're going to say app.get, and we're going to pass in slash. Which one should we create for? Let's create for the login first. And this is going to take in two variables. It's going to take in rec, and it's going to take in, I don't know why I click on that rec. It's actually a request. And we're going to come over here and say res.render. So what do you think we're going to render in here? We're going to render the login.egs, as simple as that. Okay. Now login.egs, we come over here and come over to slash login. What do you notice? Now we have something. So in this login, we can say something like h1, and I'm going to say login. And in the register, we're going to pass in the same thing, but this time around, it's going to be register. Okay. And in the index.html, we're going to create this. I'm going to say home page. So you guys should understand what's going on. Now, finally, we're going to go ahead and create one more route for the register page. So we're going to say app.get, and this is going to be slash slash register this time around. And we're going to have request, and we're going to have response. This is a function, so we're going to pass in an arrow over there. Then we're going to say res.render. You guys already know what this is going to do. Then in here, we're going to pass in register.egs. So now we have routes for the login, the homepage, and the what is called the register. So we're going to come over here and say register. Now we have register. We come over here, we say let's just go to the homepage. Now we see homepage. We come over to login. We get the login page. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Now the next thing we're going to do is just go ahead and start configuring our views. So I'm just going to come over here and put a comment. So this should be, I shouldn't call that view, let me just call this routes. Okay, and over here I'm going to say end route. So I'm going to be adding a robust comment for this, so when I deploy to GitHub, you guys would understand what all the code does. So this is going to be called importing libraries that we installed using npm. Okay, now this is importing express, and this is assigning express to the app variable. I'm still going to put a comment over there. So now in the index.egs, what we're going to do now is go ahead and build out all the homepage, the login page, and the register page, and we're going to make it look a little bit nice and look good. And I don't want to go ahead and start doing that from scratch. That's why I've built this out before I actually started shooting this video. So now I've got the index.html. This is it over here. I'm simply going to copy this. This is totally bootstrap. It's pure bootstrap. I'm sure you can do everything that's in here if you already have HTML and CSS background. But if you don't have, it's totally okay. You don't need to understand HTML and CSS to do this. What you need to understand is just very, very, very little minute part of HTML and CSS. So just copy that, paste it in here. Now as you can see, we've got the home page. Now when we come over to the login, you can see we still have login. It's not showing up anything. So we need to come over here and we still need to copy the login page, and we're gonna paste it in the login over here. So I'm just gonna paste this in, and when we refresh the login, now we have this really, really nice looking login page. Now finally for the register, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. So for the register, we need to go ahead and copy the register. This is it over here. I'm simply gonna copy this, but before this, I want to get rid of this comments. I want my code to look, a little bit clean, I'd say. Now we need to paste this in our register.egs. Now as you can see, all our pages looking totally nice. So the next thing we're going to configure is this over here. Let's say the user already have an account and they want to go back to the login page. Now when we click on this, nothing is going to happen. It's going to refresh this page. So in that case, what we simply want to do is go ahead and configure that. But before I configure that, I want to change this to register. Okay, so this is register. Now I'm going to go ahead and collapse some of this so I see some of the things that I'm doing in my code. Okay, that's it. Now for the already have an account login, we're simply going to hop over to /login, and now I'm going to come over here and refresh this. So when we click on this, what you notice is going to the login. Now in the login, we need to configure this, and we're going to put /register like this, not register but register. Now when I refresh the login page and hit register, it takes me to the register. Okay, that's another. Okay, we need to get back and refresh this page. Now when I hit this, it brings me to the register page. When I hit this, it takes me to the login page. So that's pretty much what we're going to be doing for now, and there is some things that you guys need to look out for. Okay, so first let's start off with the login page. Now in the login page, as you can see, we've got a type of email, so it's going to force the user to put in their email and all that kind of stuff. Now you need to have a name of email. So this name of email is what we'll be grabbing onto to get the email that the user is going to pass in here. Okay, so from the server over here, we're going to be using this email over here to get whatever email that the user passes in. But let's say this is empty, then there is no way we're going to be getting the email. We're not going to get anything, even though the user passes in blah 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 over here and hit sign in. We're not going to get in anything. So make sure you pass in name for this, and for the password, you also want to pass in a name of, guess it, a password. Okay, so that's simply what we need to do for the login, and we also need to do the same thing for the register. Okay, now for the full name, the inputs, we've got name, so the name is going to be name because it's supposed to be the full name. This is it over here, full name, so we're going to pass in name as name, and for the email, we're going to pass in name as email. I'm going to pass in name as email, and finally for the password, I'm going to pass in name as password. Okay, I think that's pretty much what we want to do for now. Now we're going to go ahead and start working with Node.js. We'll be hashing passwords using And that's what we're going to be creating. Let's say this over here is going to okay, I don't want to get you guys confused. Let's just go ahead and keep working with this so you guys will understand fully well what all this are doing. So I'm going to post to register, and register, it's going to take in async because we'll be using the try catch. Okay, and after async, this is the function. It's going to take in two variables, a request and response, and that's req and res. Okay, then after that, I'm going to just open up braces like this, and there's going to be parentheses, just like creating a function in JavaScript. Then after this, we're going to use a try catch in here. So it's quite straightforward. I'm going to use try catch just like this. This is where we're going to be getting all the errors, and this is where we're going to be trying. Okay, but in order to get things clear, I'm going to get rid of this over here. I'm just going to get rid of this, and yeah, this should be what I'm looking for. Now I'm going to start with the try. So in this try catch in here, what I want to do is very simple. I'm going to first of all hash the password. So I'm going to say const hashed password. Now this is going to be equal to await. So await, and I'm going to call bcrypt dot hash. So this is like, this hash over here is like a method that the bcrypt package that we imported over here, that we installed using npm has. So this hash over here is something that bcrypt has. Simple as that. Then after that, I want to go ahead and get the password. So I'm going to say request dot body comes name user -1 password. Then what do you think is going to happen in the server of what I did in here? And it's just going to be password like that. Okay, dot push, and in here easy and straightforward. Now I got the ID, and also I want to get the name, and you might be like, you know, then user everything to get specific users. Now the name over here is going to be quite easy. We're going to say request.body.name. I'll show you guys how we're getting all this name over here. Over here, as you can see, I called it, and there's going to be a comma over there. And what we're simply going to do is password is to simply go ahead and okay, select them back this. And let's create I commit this in the I want to console log this users so that when I create a user, I can see what's going on. So I'm simply going to log console password. I'm going to say nothing is EJS is going over here, refresh the one, and hit sign up. Now what do you notice? It redirects us to the login page. Okay, now let's come over here. I think this is supposed to show up something in here, but it's not happening. Let's see what's going on. I'm going to come over to my terminal. I'm going to open this up, and let's make sure that in the server.js we are console logging users. I don't know why that's not reading perfectly well. Users.push. Okay, I'm not supposed to console log this over here. Rather, I'm supposed to console log this in the try, right? Okay, let's just console log this over here. Hopefully that's what I'm looking for, and I'm going to get rid of this white space or empty line. Now when I refresh this, I'm going to try creating a new user again. I'm going to pass in all the information that I've got before, and I'm going to hit create. Now what do you notice? It goes ahead and creates a user for us. Now we've got a random ID. This is the ID. We've got the name. Remember the name we passed in from the front end. Some of password. So request.body.password, and let me refresh this over here. Come over to register. Something is going on over here. I'm going to get rid of the last comma over there. Request.body.password. As you can see, my terminal keeps loading forever and ever. It's not even stopping up. I'm going to come over here and see what's wrong. So this is running again. I'm going to refresh this, put in this. The password is testing 321. I'm going to hit enter. Now when I come over here, what do you notice? There's the ID, this is the name, this is the email, this is the password. Now as you can see, the password is in its raw format, okay? And that's what we want. That's why we are hashing the password. So that's pretty much it for the register. Now we have a register end of our terminal, and we run it again. Now we're not going to have all this created user again. So that's why it's very, very necessary. And we're going to be doing this using passports. So passports is a simple library in Node.js that helps us work with things like authentication right out of the box. You don't need to implement every other thing by yourself. It's going to help you. Let's say you want to log in with your social accounts, you want to log in with username and password, email and password, and all that kind of stuff. Passports is something that's really going to help you achieve all this easily. Okay, and in order to get started using passports, we're going to open up our terminal, and we need to install passports. So we're going to say npmi passport. So npm install passport and help us with. So express session is simply going to help us store sessions across our doesn't match, or the email wasn't installing. Okay, this was it over here. So it successfully installed everything. Or I don't want to make like, before we do this, we want to go ahead and work with some other things first. Let me not make this really cumbersome. I don't want to make like a code from up to down writing of it. I just want to go ahead and explain everything on the go. Okay, now I'm going to create a new file over here, and we're going to call it, let's call it passport config.js. You could totally call this whatever you want. Well, I'm going to say passport config.js, trying to stick to convert from passport require passport.local. And after this, we want to go ahead and create a new function. Now let's make sure that's looking good. So we want to pass social. To do this, I think there is like over here, and I want to say, so what do we want? Then we want to say that the user found with that email. Okay, the user found that email. Yeah, that's quite okay. Now after this, there is a couple things we want to do. So we want to use the try catch. Now I'm gonna click on that over there, and we're gonna use try catch and do some pretty easy things. Firstly, in here, I'm gonna write an if statement. So this if statement is simply gonna be an if statement that's gonna compare passwords. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is go ahead and pass in await in here. So I'm gonna pass in await, and after that I want to pass in bcrypt. So bcrypt here is gonna compare passwords for us. So I told you guys there is a lot of things that comes with bcrypt, like hash. I've seen compare. So we want to compare some password. Now we want to compare the password that's the user's passing in with the password that we've got in our database. Okay, the password that the user's passing in with the password that we've got in our database. And after that, what else do we want to do in here? So we want to simply go ahead and return done, and we're gonna pass in null and user. So in here we're gonna write an if statement, and this if statement is simply gonna help us compare passwords. So we're gonna say await, and we want to pass in bcrypt in here. So this bcrypt is gonna help us compare passwords. So from the other time we've seen the hash method, now we're looking at the compare method. So it's gonna compare the password that the user's passing in and the password that we've got in our database, or this time around in our array. So when all this happens, what we want to do, we want to simply go ahead and return done, and we're gonna pass in null, and we're gonna pass in user, just like that. But how about everything goes well the way we want? What do we want to do? We want to go ahead and we are done with the if statement and the try hash. Now what we're supposed to do is simply go ahead and return an error. So I'm simply going to return done, and we're going to pass in e. So if for any reason we're going to be getting any error, I'm going to go ahead and log the error down. I'm going to say console.log e, just like that. Okay, now I think that should be it. Now the next thing we should do is go ahead and do some couple things down here. I'm going to say passport.use, or I think they should still be in this place over here in this function. So I'm simply just gonna get down a bit over here, and I'm gonna say passport.use, not user, and we want to set this to a couple things. So just follow along with what I'm doing. Firstly, there's gonna be a new local strategy, not storage, whatever you want you can use. Then after the passport user rather, I'm gonna do something. So we're gonna do one. Now we're gonna go ahead and start working with this, and there's a couple things written, a very basic function over requires. One, we want to go ahead and export the in Node.js. We want to do is quite easy. We're going to go ahead and use the initialize passport that we created above to do something. Okay,
And to use that local version of Passport, one thing to note is that every time we save our application and it reloads, this variable users is going to get reset to. This is something, again, you would not want to do in a production application. Now that we have our register functionality done, the next thing to work on is login, and the actual act of checking to make sure the user's name and email and password are the same is not too difficult, but to actually persist that user across all of your different requests gets a little bit involved. So we're going to use a really handy library called passport.js, which is used by nearly as well as passport local passport pages flash set up our passport to be working with our login. Passport config.js, and in here we're going to put all of our different passport related information, and we're going to do it all inside of a function which we're going to just call initialize. There we go. And inside of this function, we're going to initialize our passport, which we're going to make sure that we pass to our initialize function. And then inside of our server, what we want to do is we actually want to require that. So we can just come down here and we can require that function, which we're going to just call initialize. There we go. And inside of this function, we're going to initialize our passport, which we're going to make sure that we pass to our initialize function. And then inside of our server, what we want to do is we actually want to require that. So we can just come down here and we can require. Inside of this function, we're going to initialize our passport, which we're going to make sure that we pass to our initialize function. And then inside of our server, what we want to do is we actually want to require that. So we can just come down here and we can require that function. We'll just call it here, initialize passport. Whoops. And that's going to be equal to require. And we want to make sure that we require here our passport config. And then we can just call that function initialize passport. And we'll pass it in our passport variable, which we can just get by using const passport is equal to require of passport, which is just that library we just installed. Now we are calling this function initialize passport inside of our passport config here, and we can do all of our is equal to require of passport, which is just that library we just installed. Now we are calling this function initialize passport inside of our passport config here, and we can do all of our configuration for passport inside of this single file. And to use that local version of passport, what we want to do is we want to come up here and we want to create a variable, which is going to call local strategy. Strategy. There we go. And we're going to set this equal to require passport local, and we just want to get the strategy from that. So we can just say dot strategy. This is going to be our local strategy. And then we can come down here and say passport.use, and we actually want to use that local strategy. So we can just say new local strategy, and inside of here, this is going to take options. The first option that we want to pass is we want to pass the username field. And this essentially says, what is our username called? By default, it's going to be username, but in our example, we're calling this email. So here, we just want to put in email. And you can also pass in the password field, but it defaults to password, and in our application, we already call it passport or password, so we're perfectly fine there. The next thing that we need to do is we actually need to pass a second variable here, which is going to be the function that this is going to call to authenticate our user. So we'll just create a function here. We're just going to call it authenticate user. There we go. And we're just going to pass in that function name, which we'll create up here as a function called authenticate user. And actually, to make this easier on ourselves, we're actually going to put this authenticate user function inside of our initialize function. We'll just make it an arrow function. And this authenticate user function is going to take in a few different parameters. The first parameter that this is going to take in is going to be the email. In our case, this is the username field. Next thing is going to be our password. And lastly, it's a done function. Essentially, we're going to call this whenever we're done authenticating our user. So now that we have that done, we have our passport.use set up. The next thing we need to do is set up passport for serializing our user. So we can just come in here, serialize user, and inside of here, we're going to take a function, which is going to take a user, and it's going to take a done, and this is going to serialize our user to store inside of the session, and we need to have a function which is going to do the exact opposite of deserializing our user, and this is again going to take in here an ID, and done, because we're going to serialize our user as a single ID. Now let's work on our authenticate user function, because this is essentially what we're going to call from our login using our email password to make sure our user is correct. So the first thing we want to do is get our user by email. So we can just create a user here, and we're just going to say that this is going to be get user by email. And we're going to pass in the email. This is a function that we're going to create, but we don't have to worry about it right now. We just know that this is going to return us a user by email, or it's going to return null if there is no email for that user. user. So we want to check to make sure that we actually have a user. So we can say if our user is null, then we for some reason cannot find the user and we want to return. So we can just say return done, which is this function we need to call every time we're done. And the first parameter is the error. In our case, we don't have an error because the error would be if something went wrong on your server. And in our case, there is no error on the server. The next thing we need to do is we need to return the user we found. In our case, we found no user, so we'll return false. And we can also return a message, which will be displayed. This is essentially our error message. We can just say no user with that email. There we go. And now that we know if we get past this if statement that we actually have a user, what we can do is we can actually try to make sure that the user's password matches this password that's passed in here. And to do that, we're going to need bcrypt. So let's make sure we take in bcrypt by using the require statement. Whoops, require. And we want to require that bcrypt library just like that. And then down here, this is again asynchronous. So we're going to wrap this inside of a try catch. And inside of the try portion of this try catch, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we check by awaiting our bcrypt dot compare. And the first thing we want to pass in is the password that the user sent in with the login form, which is this password. And we want to compare that to our user.password. Just like this. Whoops, password. And if this returns true, then that means that we actually have an authenticated user, so everything returns successfully. But else, if it did not return true, then that means that our user's password did not match. So let's do the bad case first. We're going to return done with no error. And we want to return false here because we don't have a user again. The passwords did not match. And we also want to return a message here. And this message essentially is going to say password incorrect, just like that. And if we for some reason did find the user, our passwords are correct, we want to return done, again with no error, but this time we're going to return the user that we want to actually authenticate with. This is the user that they have actually logged in as. And lastly, inside of our catch here, let's catch that error. And we don't return done here, but we want to return that error inside of our done statement as our first parameter because we actually had an error with our application. So now the only thing we have left is this get user by email. We need to make sure we pass that in. So we're going to pass that into our initialize function here. And we need to make sure down here that we actually export that function. So we're going to say modules.export, or I'm sorry, module.exports is going to be equal to that initialize function. This is just so we can call that function by requiring in our passport config that we created here. So back into our server, inside of our passport, we actually want to pass in that function. It's going to take in an email. So email. And inside of here, what we're going to do is we just want to say users.find, and we want to find where our config that we created here. So back into our server, by exports is going to be equal to that initialize function. This is just so we can call that function by requiring in our passport config that we created here. So back module.exports is going to be equal to that initialize function. This is just so we can call that function by requiring in our passport config that we created here. So back into our server, inside of our passport, we actually want to pass in that function. It's going to take in. This is just so we can call that function by requiring in our passport config that we created here. So back into our server, inside of our passport, we actually want to pass in that function. It's going to take in an email. So email, and inside of here, what we're going to do is we just want to say users.find, and we want to find where our user.email is equal to the email that we passed in, and we want to make sure that we return that. And to make this even easier to read, let's make sure we put all of these on different lines, just like this. We can actually put this all onto a single line up here. There we go. Remove a bunch of these extra parentheses, and there we go. This is our function for finding the user based on the email, and this is our passport that we're configuring. Now that we have our passport configured, what we need to do is we actually need to work on a bunch of use statements, essentially so that our server knows how to use passport. The first thing that we want to do is an app.use, and this one's going to be for flash, which we have not actually required yet, so let's make sure we require that. We're going to say const flash is going to be equal to require, whoops, in here we have express flash. We also need to do the exact same thing for session. These are just the libraries that we installed earlier. And now down here with our app.use, we have flash as our first one. The next one we need to use is session, and session actually takes a bunch of different options. The first one is a secret. This is essentially a key that we want to keep secret, which is going to encrypt all of our information for us. And we're going to get this from our environment variables. So we'll say process.env.session session underscore secret. This is just going to be the name of our secret key, which we're going to put inside of our .env file. So we'll say session underscore secret, and you can set this to whatever you want. In our case, we'll just set it to secret. You still most likely want to generate this as a random string of characters so that it's more secure. The longer and more random it is, the more secure it'll be. Now back inside of our, we'll just set it to secret. You still most likely want to generate this as a random string of characters so that it's more secure. The longer and more random it is, the more secure it'll be. Now back inside of our server here, we actually need to load in our environment variables. So we'll do that at the very top of our application. We can just say if our process.env.node env is not equal to production. Essentially, it means that we're in development. We want to require that development dependency of .env, and we want to call .config, and this is going to load in all of our different environment variables and set them inside of process.env. Now with that out of the way, we have a few more properties that we need to set. The first one is resave. We want to set this to false. Essentially, this says, should we resave our session variables if nothing has changed? In our case, we don't want to resave it if nothing has changed. And lastly, we have save uninitialized, which again we want to be false, and essentially this is saying, do you want to save an empty value in the session if there is no value, and we don't actually want to do that. Now with Flash and session out of the way, we can set up passport, so we can say app.use passport.initialize. This is just a function inside of passport, which is going to set up some of the basics for us. And since we want to store our variables to be persisted across the entire session our user has, we want to use passport.session, which is going to work with our app.use session up here. And now with all that finally out of the way, we can come down to our post for our login, and we actually don't even need this function because we're just going to use the passport authentication middleware. So we can say passport.authenticate, and we want to use the local strategy. And what we want to do is pass it a list of options for things that we want to modify. The first is going to be where do we go if there's a success. So our success redirect is going to go to our homepage, which is just / up here. What we do is pass it a list of options for things that we want to modify. The first is going to be where do we go if there's a success. Pass it a list of options for things that we want to modify. The first is going to, and what we want to do is pass it a list of options for things that we want to modify. The first is we want to redirect them back to the login. And we also want to make sure that we show a message. So we'll set failure flash to true. This is just going to let us have a display that error. And this is just essentially saying that we have an error message. And we know that they get. And now in order to display that, and this is just essentially saying authenticate user that needs to be asynchronous. And now if you save that, you see we're getting a final error here, which is saying that local strategy requires a verify callback. And whoops, don't want to actually go there. And if we scroll down to where we're defining our local strategy, you see that we're not actually passing authenticate user to our local strategy, we're passing it to passport.use. So let's make sure that we are properly passing authenticate user to our new local strategy and not to the passport.use. Now let's save that. Scroll down, you can see that we have no errors with use. So let's make sure that we are properly passing authenticate user strategy, we're passing it to passport.use. So let's make sure that we are properly passing authenticate user to our new local strategy and not to the passport.use. Now let's save that. Scroll down, you can see that we have no errors with the application, so we can refresh over here and our login page is working. Let's try to register with a user. We'll just do w at w, and w. And now if we try to log in with a random email and a random password, we click login. Whoops, we make sure this is an email. And you'll see that it says no user with that email. Now let's use the correct email and a wrong password, and we'll get password incorrect. And now finally, if we use the correct email and the correct password, click login, you see that it's loading for a while, and that's probably because we have an error. And we do actually have an error. We're not actually implementing our serialized user or our deserialized user functions yet. So let's do that. Inside of our serialized user, all we need to do is serialize our user, so we can just say user.id. We just want to get the user's ID and save that into our session. And we need to make sure that we pass this to the done function. Null is for our error, and in here, user ID is the actual serialized version of our user. Next, we need to do almost the exact same thing for our deserialize, but instead of here, what we want to do is we actually want to get the user. So what we're going to do is wrap this onto a separate line so it's a bit easier to read for you all. And we want to get our user by ID. So we'll just say get user by ID, and we're going to pass it in the ID right here that we're getting. And we want to make sure that we return this. And this get user by ID is something we need to make sure we pass in up here. So let's pass in this get user by ID, go into our server, scroll up to where we defined that, just right here. And we're going to define a function which takes an ID, and we're going to get a user by that ID. And it's going to be almost exactly the same as our email function, but instead of comparing emails, we're going to be comparing IDs, just like this. Now we can actually test that. We can go into our email, or our register, make sure we register that user, and we can type in the email correctly and the password, click login, and you'll see it redirects us back to that perfect page for our index of where we want to log in if we have an authenticated user. And the best part about using Passport is that we can get our user really easily. Instead of passing our name, we want to pass our user's name. So we can just say here, our request.user.name. And request.user is just going to be the actual user that we're using. Now if we save this, make sure we go back to our register page, re-register our user, and we want to use that exact email and login. You'll see it says hi W, which is the name of the user that we specified. And that's the power of using session with Passport, is request.user is always going to be sent to the user that's authenticated for that moment. But there's a big problem with our application. For example, if we were to just save this so that our user no longer exists, we can go to this index page and it gives us an error because we don't have a user, and we can access this information even if we're not logged in. But of course, we don't want to allow non-logged in users to access this information. So let's work on protecting all of our different routes for when we're not logged in. And to do this is actually really simple. Let's just minimize this so it's a little bit out of the way. And we just want to create a new function. This function is going to be check auth error. And this is just essentially curly braces. Whoops, we make sure this is an email. And you'll see that it says no user with that email. Now let's use the correct email and a wrong password, and we'll get password incorrect. And now finally, if we use the correct email and the correct password, click login, you see that it's loading for a while, and that's probably because we have an error. And we do actually have an error. We're not actually implementing our serialized user or our deserialized user functions yet. So let's do that. Inside of our serialized user, all we need to do is serialize our user. So we can just we close that off. In the session, we want to use passport.session authentication. And what we want to do is pass it a list of options for things that we want to modify. The first is going to be where do we go if there's a success. So our success redirect is going to go to our homepage, which is just / up here. And for some reason, if there's a failure, where do we want to redirect? And we want to redirect them back to the login. And we also want to make sure that we show a message. So we'll set failure flash to true. This is just going to let us have a flash message, which we can display to the user, which is going to be equal to our messages in here. So no user with that email or password incorrect, depending on what the error is that they get. And now in order to display that error message, we need to go into our login.egs, and we need to use our EJS here in order to actually first have an if statement. And we want to check if messages.error. And this is just essentially saying that we have an error message. And the way that this messages.error gets set is Flash is going to set a messages variable to all of our different Flash messages, and Passport is going to set a error message here, which is going to be whatever error that we get. For example, over here, no user with that name or password incorrect is going to be what error is set to. So if we do have an error being set, what we want to do is we just want to render that. So we can just say locals.messages.error. Actually, we don't even need the locals. We can just remove that. It's just messages.error. Make sure we close that off. And of course, we also need to make sure that we close off our curly braces here. So now we're actually going to display our message if we have one. And if we save, refresh, you can see that we're getting an error. So let's go over to our application here, see what our error is. If we scroll up, you see that it's saying that we're having an error here on line 12. It's saying that it can't understand what bcrypt is, and it's actually because it can't understand await, because we need to have an asynchronous function here. So now if we save that, scroll back down, you see we're getting the same error, and that's just because I put async in the wrong spot. It's this authenticate user that needs to be asynchronous. And now if you save that, you see we're getting a final error here, which is saying that local strategy requires a verify callback. And whoops, don't want to actually go there. And if we scroll down to where we're defining our local strategy, you see that we're not actually passing authenticate user to our local strategy. We're passing it to passport.use. So let's make sure that we are properly passing authenticate user to our new local strategy and not to the passport.use. Now let's save that, Scroll down, you can see that we have no errors with our application, so we can refresh over here and our login page is working. Let's try to register with a user. We'll just do W at W, and W. And now if we try to log in with a random email and a random password, we click login. Whoops, we make sure this is an email. And you'll see that it says no user with that email. Now let's use the correct email and a wrong password, and we'll get password incorrect. And now finally, if we use the correct email and the correct password, click login, you see that it's loading for a while, and that's probably because we have an error. And we do actually have an error. We're not actually implementing our serialized user or our deserialized user functions yet. So let's do that. Inside of our serialized user, all we need to do is serialize our user, so we can just say user.id. We just want to get the user's ID and save that into our session. And we need to make sure that we pass this to the done function. Null is for our error, and in here, user ID is the actual serialized version of our user. Next, we need to do almost the exact same thing for our deserialize, but instead of here, what we want to do is we actually want to get the user. So what we're going to do is wrap this onto a separate line so it's a bit easier to read for you all. And we want to get our user by ID. So we'll just say get user by ID, and we're going to pass it in the ID right here that we're getting. And we want to make sure that we return this. And this get user by ID is something we need to make sure we pass in up here. So let's pass in this get user by ID, go into our server, scroll up to where we defined that, just right here. And we're going to define a function which takes an ID, and we're going to get a user by that ID. And it's going to be almost exactly the same as our email function, but instead of comparing emails, we're going to be comparing IDs, just like this. Now we can actually test that. We can go into our email, or our register, make sure we register that user, and we can type in the email correctly and the password, click login, and you'll see it redirects us back to that perfect page for our index of where we want to log in if we have an authenticated user. And the best part about using Passport is that we can get our user really easily. Instead of passing our name, we want to pass our user's name. So we can just say here, our request.user.name. And request.user is just going to be the actual user that we're using. Now if we save this, make sure we go back to our register page, re-register our user, and we want to use that exact email and login. You'll see it says hi W, which is the name of the user that we specified. And that's the power of using session with Passport, is request.user is always going to be sent to the user that's authenticated for that moment. But there's a big problem with our application. For example, if we were to just save this so that our user no longer exists, we can go to this index page and it gives us an error because we don't have a user. And we can access, what we want to do is we actually want to get the user. So what we're going to do, user by ID is something we need to make our secret key. For some reason, if there's a failure, where do we want to redirect? And we want to redirect to true. This is just going to let us have a flash message